Welcome back everyone. Well, in this session, just like previous session, we are going to get back to our codes very soon. But before we start, I want to tell you something that this box shadow and this text shadow that we used before, I just customized them a little, and this is our result now, and this is what I wanted to inform you. I just changed the values a little. So, and since this RGBA is something that I am using so many times, I call it shadow color. And again, don't forget that we start all of our variable names with two hyphens. And this is our shadow color, and our shadow color is a RGBA, but these two were hex codes. So now this var that I'm using here, I am going to apply this var to this shadow color that we have. So this is another variable that I'm using, so I don't have to type this RGBA every time. Then these are my values, variables. And another good thing about this is that imagine that your project has gone big and you just need to change something, and when you change it from here, it will be applied to wherever else that it's been using. For example, let's imagine that this shadow color is something that I want to change in future. When I change it only in this line, it will be changed everywhere. But in previous examples, I have to go ahead and look everywhere and see where I have used this code that I have written here. So if we come back here, this logo here is something that we have designed. This will come back. This is completely okay as well. If we go ahead and check the font size, let's check the font size here. You can go into inspect. Does it tell us the font size here? It should say it's 36 pixels, this logo here. And if we go here, inspect element, and this H2, there's something in this toolbox. Let's learn. We have never assigned any font size to this H2, right? So browser is using something from the default browser settings that it have compared to for H2 tag. We can go in computed section here and we can see what font size is being applied to this. As you can see, the font size is 24 pixels. This is what has been applied. So I can go ahead and change it. So let's go ahead in this logo thing that we have. I first use a font size. I increase the font size to 36 pixels. And there's another thing called line height. And I'm going to tell you what line height is. But for example, first let's set this to 54 pixels. And get back to our codes, hit refresh, and this is it. This is good to go. So what is line height? So let's get back to our codes. Let's change this welcome back. I want to repeat this welcome back for sometimes, as you can remember, we set Ctrl+Shift+D to duplicate lines. So I go ahead and make it a lot of thing that we have this here. So as you can see, there's a space between any line. So in other words, every line that we have here has a height. So I can go here, for example, this P that we have here, I can set a line height, for example, 2em twice, or 3em, or even, for example, 120 pixels. As you can see, we can control the line height. So this is another CSS property, line height, so that you now know about. So hit Ctrl+Z, and this is it. Let's get back to our codes, hit refresh, and this is exactly as it is. And if we go inside this inspect, As we can see, the font weight is 400. Well, the 400 font weight is the normal weight, and the font size is 16 pixels, and the line height is 22 pixels. The line height is the default. And as I imagine, this is this p tag. Let's go into computed section and see the font size. The font family has been mentioned, but font size is not mentioned here because it's the default, and the default for the browser, for example, Google Chrome default browser font size, and we can see it's 16 pixels as I can remember. Google Chrome default font size, it is 16 pixels maybe. Yes, font size 16 pixel. So it is using 16 pixel, but to ensure that we have that 16 pixel everywhere, there's something that usually developers do, is that they set some default values for their p tags, for their a tag, for anything. For example, for our p tag, we want to make sure that the font size is 16 pixels and the line height is 22 pixels. So this way we are sure that, well, in Chrome it already worked, and in Chrome it was already 16 pixels default. This is what our p tags look like, and this is something I want to apply to all of my p tags. Any p tags that I opened, I want to have this font size and line height. If by any means I wanted a different font size or line height for any specific p tag, I just give a class to this p tag, for example a test class to that p tag, and I just change it here in my selector, because class selectors are stronger than tag selectors. For example, let's go here and give it a class test, and in here I apply a font size, and apply it to, for example, 20 pixels. Okay, so as you can see here, in p tag I mentioned font size 16 pixel, but here in test class I mentioned that the font size should be 20 pixels. So what happens is it goes and will use 20 pixels because class selectors are stronger than tag selectors, and ID selectors are stronger than class selectors. These strength of selectors is something that we are going to cover in more depth in future sessions, but for now you have an imagination of these strengths that I'm talking about. So we apply this font size and line height to every p tag, and if one day we decided to have a different font size or line height for any p tag, we just assign a class to this and customize that with a class selector. Okay, so that's what I wanted you to know. So this is it. This is our p tag, and this is our logo here. We'll come back here, and this is our login here. As you can see, let's go the font weight is on 600, so I give it a class and main title. I can go ahead and select this main title, which is inside white area and space dot main title. So go ahead and select the main title, which is inside white title, and we are going to give it a font weight, and the font weight can be a number from 100 to 900, and usually we can use the words bold, bolder, lighter, normal. The normal is 400. So, but I recommend rather than using these words, because these words are not very clear, that how much is bolder or how much is bold, that they're not that clear. But when you use a number, you are pretty much, it's more understandable. So I go ahead and use this 600 font weight because this is what is being used here, font weight 600, and the font size is 56 pixel and the line height is 84 pixel. So we can go ahead and customize all of that. Font size 56, line height 84 pixel, and this is our main title. Now we are sure that the login is like the thing that we have here, and we are now trying to fix this email and password thing that we are using. So I want to go ahead and assign a width 100% to this input and set the display of input elements to block. So let's get back to our codes, and here inside our, I have two divs here, one div for email, one div for password, and let's here tell you something. I want to introduce a new tag, and that new tag is a form tag. Okay, the form tag is just like a div. It's a block by default. The display is default by block. But why this form element is created? Because in a real world, what happens is, well, we get some elements, some values from user. For example, user types something here and something here and hits on login and the form will be submitted. But when this form is submitted, where these data should be sent to, right? He hits enter and we should send these data, these values that user has inputted. We need to send them somewhere, right? And that somewhere is specified in action attribute. It's something that backend developer gives us. For example, the backend developer tells us, hey, you frontend developer, this form that you are building, I want to set the action to somewhere that I want. In form, we have some attributes. Another thing that I want you to know is method, and this action thing, for now I just hit a pound sign for the action, and we have two methods for sending data. One is get request, one is post request. Okay, but the difference between get request and post request is something that for now you do not need to know what they are. Just imagine that for sending some data to backend, there are for now two methods, one get and one post, and usually they both are correct, the both uppercase and lowercase. Usually some people prefer to write this post in lowercase and some people in uppercase. But when I said HTML is a lowercase, yes, HTML is lowercase and we should use everything lowercase. But for the HTML code, look at this. This is HTML code. This is HTML code. This is HTML code. But for this, if we write email, well, this is not a HTML code. This is the text that we are using for this label. So we are completely free to use uppercase here. Same thing goes for here. This is a value inside this method. So I should not use this method in uppercase because as I told you, use lowercase for HTML, but this is the value inside this thing, and some people even use uppercase, some people use lowercase, and there's no difference between them, and go ahead with anything that you like and pleases you. So I have created a form here, and something that I forgot is that this button that we are using, this button should be inside this form as well. So this is something that we should not forget. So let's go back and to this form that we are using, I give it assign a class to this, and I call it login form. Okay, and I go ahead and select this login form in my CSS. Okay, dot login form, and any input that is inside this login form, we can use this white area if we want to. Let's use that because login form is something inside white area, white area. So don't forget the dot behind it. And any input that is inside this, I want to have a display of block. Let's go here, hit refresh, the display block. It doesn't increase this to 100% because it has some default behavior for inputs. That's why for input you need to specify that with 100% because browser usually have some default behavior for inputs. So as you can see, this is our email, this is our password here, email, password, and forgot password goes there. And this is it for this session. The video is getting too long. This is what we designed, and we will continue where we left off in the next session. So let's sum up what we learned. So if we sum up the new CSS properties that we learned in this session, so some of them we saw before, like font family maybe, but let's sum up all of them here. Font family was used to set the font we are using. For example, we can use Poppins, we can use Calibri, we can use Railway, anything. There are so many fonts in the world. The font size, as you can guess the size of the fonts, and in font weight we have two types of value. Some of them are words, like the default one is normal, which is normal is like 400. 400 is normal and it is the default value, but we have other values like bold, bolder, lighter, and basically, and the numbers are like 100, 200, 300, 400, and until 900. And the more font weight that we have, the bolder the text gets. And we saw what line height is. So these are the new CSS properties that we learned. And if we are take a look inside our HTML section, the form tag was something that we learned. We saw two new attributes that can be attached to this. The action is something that backend developer gives us and tells us what value to put there, and the method is also being told by the backend developer, which tells us to use get or post or anything. So and all of the form elements, the form itself, the inputs itself, they have a lot of specific attributes themselves. We have seen some of them, but for example, for forms and inputs, there we have a lot of more attributes which we will see throughout this course. No new general attributes, so these are things that we learned in this session. So hope to see you in next session.